I'm going to begin by asking Professor Guy Standing to talk a little bit about his book, and The Precarious, the New Dangerous Class, which if you haven't read, I urge you to do so, and I'm sure at the end of this session you will want to do so, and in fact you can do so by purchasing a discount copy of the book outside a bit later. But so, Guy, if I can invite you to kick us off.
Thank you very much. Whoops. Good stuff. Thank you very much. It's always difficult to be the first speaker because you've got to try and set the context and set the tone for the discussion of the day. But it's a great privilege, and I mean that when I say that this conference is about an increasingly important range of issues. And of course, most of us in this room, including myself, are migrants in one way or the other. And this city happens to be one of the most extraordinary migrant cities in the world, where over a third of the population is foreign-born. That is an extraordinary number. And that has risen steadily over the last 30 years. I mean, it's continuing to rise. And it's a very important stylized fact to bear in mind. Now, I think when one thinks about migrants and migration policy, the Kantian principle of do unto others what you would wish they would do unto yourself is very, very important to bear in mind. And when I come back towards the end, I hope to talk a bit about that particular principle. Because so many of the policies around the world at the moment invite the response, supposing other countries were to do exactly what this country is doing, and we were all to do it, what would be the consequences? Frightening. Now, what I would like to do in the next few minutes is put those philosophical musings to one side and give a context which is based, as has just been said, on a book, The Precarious, which is something in the water. Because since I wrote the book, I've been invited all over the world. I've spoken about it in 27 countries so far. And today is a personal moment, of no significance to you, but to me personally, which it happens to be the 100th time I've spoken about the book at a public conference in the past year. And I promise you, I'm much more tired than I was a year ago as a result. Now, I'm an economist, and we're in the middle of a Polanyian global transformation. And that global transformation is about the painful construction of a globalized market system. And what it entails, and what neoliberalism entails, is a systematic liberalization of our economic systems around the world. And when it started in the early 1980s, essentially what happened was a process of commodification of everything that's possible to commodify started. And you can trace that, and I've traced that in a previous book, Work After Globalization, and a bit in this book. And the biggest single factor that happened was that effectively overnight, historically, we trebled the world's labor supply to the open market system. India and other countries effectively trebled the world labor supply, and all those people coming into the global market system were habituated and resigned to work for 1/50th of what any of us in this room would expect. Now, you don't have to be an economist with a PhD to realize that if you do that, you're going to put downward pressure on the wages and benefits and standards of living in the rich, industrialized countries. And in effect, what happened was that we began a process of labor re-regulation, not deregulation. Anyone who says it was labor market deregulation that we've been experiencing should be told to go and take up something like gardening or sewage cleaning or something like that. What we've seen is a systematic process of labor re-regulation, which has profoundly transformed the way labor markets work. And in the process, we've seen a systematic dismantling of all forms of collective organization. The weakening of trade unions, the weakening of universalistic social protection, the weakening, very crucially, of the old guild system of professions and occupations, and many other things that have taken place. And we've seen a gradual global convergence starting. But the politicians and the economists advising them in the early 1980s and 1990s knew that if there was a rush to declining living standards in the rich countries, there would be political consequences of enormous kind. So they made, in effect, a Faustian bargain with us, the populations. And the Faustian bargain said, basically, as we make our labor markets more flexible, as we diminish the securities that people experienced in the mid-20th century, as we made wages fall, we will top it up with things like tax credits, subsidies, and other forms of protections that were unsustainable in a longer term. So you could have your orgy of consumption, you could have your orgy of spending, but sooner or later, like every Faustian bargain, there will be a price to pay. And of course, 2008 was the price. Since when, under the tragic euphemism of austerity, we're having the next stage of the process of adjusting to the globalization. Now, in the process of all that, we have seen a new class structure emerging across the world, superimposed on other class structures. At the top, you have a plutocracy, a tiny fraction, not the 1%, it's the 0.something%, who are global citizens striding the globe, influencing. We know their names. We wish we didn't. Many of them are criminals, and let's be honest. A long way below the plutocracy is a salariat, people who've still got employment security and all the trappings, the paid holidays, the ability to be in retreats, in fancy hotels, playing golf and calling it work. All these people are a shrinking part of the total, but they're doing very nicely indeed. Alongside the plutocracy and the salariat is a growing group of what I call proficients. Now, if you are one of those, and I'm perhaps one of those myself, you'll meet them daily at an airport as you rush around with their laptops over their shoulders, and they're rushing around calling themselves an NGO or a business or whatever, doing very well. Their only problem is burnout at the age of about 31 and a half. Below the proficients is the old shrinking working class. I work a lot in India. Even in India, that old working class is a shrinking proportion of the total. It's not dead, but it's dying. Now, the irony of that is that the welfare states and the labor regulations built up in the 20th century were for that class. And now it's shrinking. And it's below the old core proletariat that we have the emerging precariat. And below the precariat is a lumpen precariat, the social victims, the bag ladies in the streets. Now, what is the precariat? Because the precariat is growing everywhere in the world. I get correspondence from Japan, South Africa, everywhere, about I am a member of the precariat. The precariat is a class in the making at the moment. It consists of millions and millions of people who are experiencing chronic insecurities, various forms of insecurity, but they have distinctive relations of production. They have insecure labor, but also unstable labor. Unlike the old proletariat, they're gradually being habituated to accept as natural that they will be doing unstable labor for most of their lives. They also have distinctive relations of distribution. in that their income comes mainly from money that they can earn in the market system. They don't have access to enterprise benefits, secure state benefits, or the community benefits that go with the commons. That makes them very distinctive. But above all, they lack a sense of occupational identity. They lack the capacity to have an occupational narrative to give to their lives. I am becoming something. I am something. I was something. That lack of a narrative to be able to give to their lives is profoundly insecure and alienating. But not only that, they have to suffer from poverty traps, in the sense that they only get access to means-tested benefits if they are deemed to be poor and deserving poor. So that many in the precariat face marginal tax rates in going from any benefits into a low-paying job of 80%, 90%, maybe over 100%. This is not a British thing only, it's happening all over the world. This heavily marginal tax rate is something that if you said to the salariat or Mr. Osborne, he would say, no, we mustn't have above 40% tax rate for the salariat. To be disgraceful. But the precariat has to put up with 80%. But above that, it has what I call precarity traps. Imagine if you're a migrant, if you're a woman with a small child, or any of us, and you want access to state benefits of any sort. You will find they're not only meaner and leaner and subject to more conditionality, but you'll have to apply for them, join queues, find you've gone in the wrong queue with the wrong papers, have done the wrong thing, you've used the wrong tone, and you'll get sent back. And it takes people months, in some countries years, before they get access to benefits. If they succeed, along will come some privatized employment agent and say you must take that low-paying job the other side of London. It's only casual, no benefits. It pays about the minimum wage, may only last 3 weeks. Now, which idiot here would rush to take that job? None of us would. But that is the sort of situation the precariat is having to accept with increasing regularity. I've just come from the States, and I happened to be asked, they foolishly asked me, to talk about my book in the World Bank. Halfway through, when I got to this stage, I said the most stupid test at the moment I've heard for access to benefits is a urine test. And the chair said, now come on, please, don't exaggerate. He was a senior executive in the World Bank. And I said, I bet you. The next day he wrote and apologized. I won the bet. In a growing number of states and a number of European countries, if you want access to benefits, you have to take a urine test. And to add insult to injury or the other way round, you have to pay for your urine test. And the reason is, you see, you might have taken drugs a year ago and it's still be in your blood system. And if you've taken drugs, you're clearly an undeserving poor and you don't deserve benefits from the state. We're having that sort of trend, and we're seeing many idiocies that we should be calling idiocies.